Hi, I'm Rachel. At my cousin's engagement party, my sister Madison looked me dead in the eye and called me family embarrassment in front of 40 people. She said I'd never amount to anything, that I was wasting my business degree working retail while she climbed the corporate ladder at prestigious firms. 3 months later, she walked into the glass conference room on the 32nd floor, portfolio in hand, ready for what she called the interview that would change everything. She didn't know I was sitting at the head of that table. She didn't know I'd built the company from nothing, and she definitely didn't know that her dream job depended entirely on impressing the sister she'd written off as a failure. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Tell me, have you ever had family members who made you feel like you weren't enough, only to discover they had no idea who you really were? Because mine did, and this is how everything changed. Growing up in Riverside, California, Madison and I were the Peterson sisters, born 18 months apart but living in completely different worlds. She was the golden child, the one who made honor roll every semester, who got early admission to UC Berkeley, who landed internships at companies most people only dream about working for. I was the one who struggled with traditional academics, who took longer to find my path, who worked nights and weekends just to pay for community college. Our parents, Linda and Robert Peterson, owned a small accounting firm that barely kept the lights on. They weren't wealthy, but they were proud people who believed in hard work and education. Madison embodied everything they hoped for in a daughter. I represented everything they worried about. The dynamic was set early. Family dinners meant listening to Madison's latest achievements while I picked at my food and tried to become invisible. When relatives visited, she was the one who got paraded around, asked about her plans, congratulated on her successes. I was the afterthought, the one who got the polite nods and the quickly changing subjects. By the time I turned 22, I'd accepted my role as the family disappointment. Madison had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in marketing and communications. I'd finally finished my associate's degree in business administration after 4 years of night classes while working full-time at a local electronics store. The contrast wasn't lost on anyone, especially Madison. "You could do so much more if you actually applied yourself," she'd say during our rare phone conversations. "Look at me. I started at Henderson & Associates right out of college. I'm already being considered for senior positions. You're still folding t-shirts and restocking shelves." Henderson & Associates was her pride and joy, a mid-tier marketing agency in San Francisco where she'd worked for 3 years. She talked about it like it was the pinnacle of professional achievement, dropping client names and project details whenever she got the chance. To hear her tell it, she was practically running the place. What Madison didn't know was that while she was climbing her corporate ladder, I was building something entirely different. It started small, almost by accident. Working at Tech World Electronics gave me front-row seats to the digital revolution happening in the early 2000s. I watched customers struggle with technology, saw gaps in the market that no one was addressing, noticed patterns that the bigger companies were missing. I started freelancing on weekends, helping small businesses set up their first websites, teaching them how to use social media to reach customers. It wasn't glamorous work. I charged $50 for projects that should have cost $500, working out of my studio apartment with a second-hand laptop and unlimited determination. The breakthrough came when I helped a local bakery increase their sales by 300% in 6 months through targeted online marketing and a simple e-commerce site. Word spread. More small businesses started calling. I found myself turning down weekend shifts at Tech World to handle the growing demand. That's when I met Marcus Chen, a software developer who'd been laid off from a tech startup and was freelancing to make ends meet. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Riverside where I was troubleshooting a client's payment system on their website. He overheard me explaining the problem to the client over the phone and offered to help. Marcus had the technical skills I lacked, and I had the business sense and client relationships he needed. We started collaborating on projects, splitting the revenue 50-50. Within 6 months, we'd made enough to quit our day jobs and focus on what we were calling Digital Bridge Solutions. The name came from our mission, bridging the gap between traditional small businesses and the digital world. We weren't trying to compete with the big agencies that Madison's company represented. We were serving a market that those agencies ignored: family-owned restaurants, local service providers, specialty shops that couldn't afford $10,000 marketing campaigns but desperately needed to get online. Our first office was Marcus's garage. Our conference room was his kitchen table. Our first major client was a chain of 3 auto repair shops that needed help competing with the national franchises moving into their territory. We charged them $8,000 for a complete digital overhaul, new website, social media strategy, online booking system, customer review management. 6 months later, they'd opened 2 more locations. Madison knew none of this. In her mind, I was still the retail worker who'd never figured out her life. During family gatherings, she'd make jokes about my little computer hobby and suggest I look into getting a real job with benefits and a future. The last family event before everything changed was our cousin Jenny's engagement party in March. The Riverside Country Club was decorated with white roses and soft lighting, filled with aunts, uncles, and family friends celebrating Jenny's upcoming wedding to her college sweetheart. I'd driven down from Los Angeles, where Digital Bridge Solutions had relocated 6 months earlier when we outgrew Marcus's garage and needed to be closer to our expanding client base. I wore a simple navy dress and minimal jewelry, keeping things understated. I wasn't there to make a statement, just to support Jenny and try to get through the evening without any drama. Madison arrived fashionably late, as always, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd recently gotten promoted to account director at Henderson & Associates and was radiating confidence. Her boyfriend Trevor, a finance guy from her office, accompanied her with the kind of forced smile that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The evening started pleasantly enough. I caught up with relatives I hadn't seen in months, helped Jenny with last-minute party details, and managed to avoid any extended conversations about my career. Madison held court near the bar, regaling anyone who'd listen with stories about her latest campaign for a luxury hotel chain. The trouble started during the toasts. Uncle David, Jenny's father, had asked family members to share memories and well wishes for the happy couple. Madison went first, delivering a polished speech about love, commitment, and building a life together. She was articulate and charming, every bit the successful professional. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I talked about watching Jenny and her fiancé together, about how they supported each other's dreams and celebrated each other's successes. I mentioned how rare it was to find someone who saw your potential even when you couldn't see it yourself. After the toasts, the party moved into full swing. I was standing near the dessert table, chatting with my cousin Mark about his new teaching job, when Madison approached with Trevor in tow. "Rachel," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she was about to say something cutting. "I was just telling Trevor about your situation." I looked at her, then at Trevor, who was studying his drink with obvious discomfort. "My situation? You know," she gestured vaguely, "still working retail, living in that tiny apartment, no real career prospects." Trevor was saying how hard it must be to watch everyone else move forward with their lives. The conversation around us had started to quiet down. Mark shifted uncomfortably beside me. I could feel other family members beginning to pay attention. "I'm doing fine, Madison," I said evenly. "I'm happy with my work." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Happy selling phones and laptops? Come on, Rachel. You're 26 years old. When are you going to get serious about your future?" "I am serious about my future." "Really? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're stuck. You've been finding yourself for what? 4 years now. At some point you have to accept that maybe this is as far as you're going to go." The circle of relatives had grown larger. I could see Aunt Patricia and Uncle Michael listening from across the room. Jenny was watching from near the gift table, her face tight with concern. "Madison, this isn't the place," Mark started to say. "No, it's fine," Madison cut him off. "Someone needs to say it. Rachel, you're smart enough, but you lack ambition, you're comfortable being mediocre, and honestly, it's becoming embarrassing for the family." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt my face flush, my chest tighten. Around us, conversations had stopped entirely. The string quartet was still playing, but it felt like background music to my humiliation. "Embarrassing?" I repeated quietly. "Yes, embarrassing. Do you know what it's like when people ask me about my sister? When they want to know what you do for a living? I have to make excuses. I have to explain why you're still working retail, while I'm managing million-dollar accounts. It reflects on all of us." Trevor was staring at the floor now, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Jenny had started walking over, probably to intervene, but she was too far away to stop what was happening. "You could be more," Madison continued, her voice getting louder. "You could have followed my lead, gotten a real job at a real company. Instead, you're wasting your degree, and wasting everyone's time pretending that your little hobbies are going to turn into something meaningful. I stood there for a moment, looking at my sister, really looking at her. The designer dress, the perfect makeup, the confident posture of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. She genuinely believed every word she was saying. In her mind, success looked exactly like her life, and anything different was failure. "I see," I said finally. "Good. Maybe now you'll actually do something about it." Trevor's company is hiring entry-level positions. I could put in a word, get you an interview. It's not much, but it would be a start towards something respectable. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, holding it out to me like she was offering salvation. Around us, family members were pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. I looked at the card but didn't take it. "Thank you for the offer. You're welcome. It's about time someone in this family started helping you figure out your life." I nodded slowly, then excused myself and walked toward the bathroom. Behind me, I could hear Madison continuing to talk to Trevor, probably explaining how she'd been trying to help me for years but I'd been too stubborn to listen. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back at me had built a company from nothing, employed 12 people, and generated over $2 million in revenue the previous year. But in that moment, I looked exactly like what Madison saw, a family disappointment who couldn't get her life together. I stayed in the bathroom for 10 minutes, waiting for my hands to stop shaking and my breathing to return to normal. When I came out, the party was back in full swing. Madison was holding court near the bar again, probably telling the story of how she'd finally given her sister some much-needed tough love. I found Jenny and congratulated her again, made polite excuses about an early morning, and headed for the parking lot. As I walked to my car, I could hear music and laughter drifting from the country club. It sounded like a celebration I'd never been invited to. The drive back to Los Angeles gave me 2 hours to think. Madison's words replayed in my mind, each repetition stinging a little less but leaving behind something harder and more determined. She was embarrassed by me. She thought I was wasting my life. She believed I'd never amount to anything more than a retail worker with big dreams and small results. What she didn't know was that Digital Bridge Solutions had just signed our biggest client yet, a restaurant group with 47 locations across California and Nevada. What she didn't know was that we'd been approached by 3 different venture capital firms interested in funding our expansion. What she didn't know was that in 2 weeks we'd be moving into a 15,000 square foot office space in Century City with room for 50 employees. Most importantly, what she didn't know was that her real company, the prestigious Henderson & Associates she was so proud of, had been hemorrhaging clients for months and was quietly shopping itself to larger agencies looking for acquisition targets. I'd heard rumors through industry contacts, but I hadn't paid much attention. Madison's company wasn't in our market segment, and their problems weren't my concern. But as I drove through the darkness watching the lights of Los Angeles grow brighter ahead of me, I started to wonder what might happen if those rumors were true. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex in West Hollywood, I'd made a decision. If Madison thought I was an embarrassment to the family, then maybe it was time she learned exactly what kind of business her little sister had been building while she was looking down on me. The next morning, I called Marcus from my apartment balcony, watching the sunrise paint the Hollywood Hills gold and pink. "I want to know everything about Henderson & Associates," I told him. "Madison's company? Why?" I explained what had happened at the engagement party, the public humiliation, the assumption that I was still the same lost 22-year-old who couldn't figure out her life. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, I might be able to help with that. My buddy Jake works in corporate development at Sterling Media Group. They've been looking at acquiring smaller agencies to build out their West Coast presence." Sterling Media Group, big holding company. They own about 15 different marketing and advertising firms across the country, always looking to expand. Jake mentioned they were interested in a few agencies in the Bay Area, but I don't know if Henderson & Associates was on their list. I was already opening my laptop, pulling up Sterling Media Group's website. They were exactly what Marcus described, a major player in the marketing world, the kind of company that could turn a struggling mid-tier agency into either a success story or a cautionary tale. "Can you reach out to Jake?" I asked. "Casual conversation? See what they're working on?" "Sure, but what are you thinking?" I stared at the Sterling Media Group logo on my screen. at their list of portfolio companies, at their stated mission of empowering regional agencies to achieve national impact. I'm thinking, I said slowly, that maybe it's time Digital Bridge Solutions started looking at acquisition opportunities. Jake Martinez turned out to be exactly the kind of contact Marcus had promised. Well-connected, knowledgeable, and surprisingly willing to share information over drinks at a rooftop bar in downtown LA. He was in his early 30s, sharp-dressed in the way that corporate development executives always were, with the kind of easy confidence that came from brokering million-dollar deals. Henderson and Associates, he mused, swirling his whiskey. Yeah, they've been on our radar for about 6 months. Decent client list, good location in the Bay Area, but they're bleeding money. Classic case of an agency that never adapted to digital transformation. I kept my expression neutral, sipping my wine while Marcus asked the follow-up questions. We'd agreed beforehand that he'd take the lead on the conversation to avoid raising suspicions about my personal interest. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Marcus asked. For potential acquisition, I mean. Jake shrugged. Could be next quarter, could be never. Depends on whether they figure out how to stop the hemorrhaging. Their biggest client, Meridian Hotels, just put their account up for review. If Henderson loses that contract, they'll be looking for a buyer by Christmas. Meridian Hotels. I recognized the name from Madison's constant bragging about her luxury hospitality campaigns. She'd mentioned them dozens of times over the years, always emphasizing how prestigious the account was, how much creative control she had, how the campaign had won industry awards. And if they do find a buyer? I asked, breaking my silence. Jake looked at me with renewed interest. Depends on the buyer. Sterling could absorb them completely, keep the best people and fold the rest into our existing operations. Or we might keep them as an independent subsidiary, let them maintain their culture and client relationships while providing capital and resources. What about current employees? Management structure? That's always case by case. If someone's essential to client relationships or brings unique value, they'd likely stay. But acquisition usually means streamlining, especially in redundant positions. He paused, studying my face. You thinking about getting into the M&A game, Rachel? Marcus jumped in smoothly. We've been growing pretty fast. It's always interesting to understand how the bigger players think about expansion. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I'd heard enough. Henderson and Associates was vulnerable, and Madison's job security depended entirely on keeping clients she might not be able to keep. More importantly, Sterling Media Group was actively looking for West Coast acquisitions, and they had the resources to move quickly when the right opportunity presented itself. Over the next 2 weeks, I threw myself into research. I had subscriptions to industry publications through Digital Bridge Solutions, access to financial databases, and a network of contacts who'd worked with agencies across California. What I learned painted a clear picture of a company in decline. Henderson and Associates had been founded 15 years earlier by Richard Henderson, a former advertising executive who'd built a solid reputation working with hospitality and retail clients. For the first decade, they'd grown steadily, adding staff and winning awards. But in the last 5 years, they'd struggled to adapt to changing client needs. Their biggest problem was digital transformation. While companies like Digital Bridge Solutions were helping businesses navigate social media, e-commerce, and online marketing, Henderson and Associates was still operating like it was 2005. They offered beautiful print campaigns and traditional advertising, but their digital services were basic and overpriced. The Meridian Hotels account that Jake had mentioned represented almost 30% of Henderson's annual revenue. According to industry reports I found, Meridian was specifically looking for agencies with innovative digital capabilities and proven ROI in online customer acquisition. Henderson's recent work for them had been elegant but old-fashioned. Print ads in luxury magazines, airport billboards, traditional radio sponsorships. I also discovered that Henderson and Associates had lost 3 significant clients in the past year, all citing the need for more comprehensive digital solutions. Their website hadn't been updated in 18 months. Their social media presence was sporadic and unprofessional. For a marketing agency, their own marketing was embarrassingly outdated. But the most interesting information came from a former Henderson employee named Sarah Kim, who'd reached out to me through LinkedIn after seeing Digital Bridge Solutions' growing reputation. She was looking for work and had heard we were hiring. During our interview, conducted over coffee near our Century City office, Sarah painted a detailed picture of Henderson's internal dysfunction. Madison Peterson runs the creative department like it's her personal kingdom, Sarah said, speaking freely once I'd assured her the conversation was confidential. She's talented, don't get me wrong, but she refuses to collaborate with anyone who might challenge her ideas. The digital team has been trying to modernize their approach for 2 years, but Madison blocks everything that doesn't fit her vision of elevated brand experiences. What about client relationships? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Madison takes full credit for the Meridian account, but honestly, most of their satisfaction comes from working with Tom Chen, the account director. He's the one who actually listens to their needs and manages their expectations. Madison shows up for presentations and takes the applause, but Tom does the real work. I made a mental note of Tom Chen's name. Account directors were often the most valuable assets in agency acquisitions because they maintain direct client relationships. Is Tom happy there? I asked. Sarah laughed bitterly. Nobody's happy there. Richard Henderson is checked out, counting the days until retirement. Madison's gunning for his job when he leaves, but she's alienated half the staff. Tom's been interviewing at other agencies for months. If Henderson loses Meridian, he'll probably jump ship immediately. The picture was becoming clearer. Henderson and Associates was a failing agency held together by a few key relationships and a lot of wishful thinking. Madison, for all her confidence in corporate climbing, was positioning herself to captain a sinking ship. That night, I called Marcus from my apartment balcony, watching the city lights stretch out toward the ocean. I want to make Sterling Media Group an offer they can't refuse, I said. What kind of offer? Partnership. Digital Bridge Solutions brings the modern capabilities that their acquisition targets need. Instead of Sterling having to rebuild Henderson's digital services from scratch, they'd have us as a ready-made solution. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You're talking about a merger. Not exactly, more like a strategic alliance. Sterling acquires Henderson. We become their preferred digital transformation partner. We help integrate their traditional agencies into the modern marketplace. They provide us with resources and larger clients. And Madison. I looked out at the lights of Beverly Hills, thinking about my sister's words at the engagement party. Family embarrassment. Lacking ambition, comfortable being mediocre. Madison gets to keep her job, I said finally, if she's good enough. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with our lawyer, David Restrepo, to discuss the legal and financial implications of what I was proposing. David had guided us through Digital Bridge Solutions incorporation and growth, and he understood both our capabilities and our ambitions. This is ambitious, he said after I'd outlined the plan. You're essentially positioning yourself as an acquisition facilitator and then benefiting from the resulting partnerships. Is it legal? Completely. Sterling gets better acquisition targets, you get access to larger clients and resources, everybody wins. The question is whether you can execute it. That afternoon, I started working on the proposal. Not just a pitch deck, but a comprehensive analysis of how Sterling Media Group could accelerate their West Coast expansion by partnering with Digital Bridge Solutions to modernize their acquisition targets. I included case studies from our work with small businesses, projected growth models for traditional agencies that embrace digital transformation, and a detailed breakdown of how our services could add value to Sterling's portfolio companies. The hardest part was deciding whether to mention Henderson and Associates specifically. On one hand, it would demonstrate our knowledge of the market and Sterling's interests. On the other hand, it might raise questions about why we were targeting Madison's company. In the end, I decided to include Henderson as one of several potential acquisition targets, buried in a list of Bay Area agencies that could benefit from digital transformation. Just another data point in a comprehensive market analysis. The proposal took 3 weeks to complete. When it was finished, it was 47 pages of research, analysis, and strategic recommendations. Marcus reviewed it, David checked the legal language, and our CFO Maria Gonzalez verified all the financial projections. This is impressive, Maria said during our final review meeting. If Sterling accepts this partnership, we're looking at potential revenue growth of 300% over the next 2 years. And if they don't, I asked, then we've learned a lot about corporate development, and we keep growing organically, Marcus replied. No downside, just opportunity cost. I sent the proposal to Jake Martinez on a Thursday afternoon with a cover letter explaining that Digital Bridge Solutions was interested in exploring strategic partnerships with larger media companies. I kept the tone professional and forward-looking, emphasizing our track record and growth potential rather than any specific acquisition targets. Jake called me back within 2 hours. Rachel, "This is exactly what we've been looking for," he said, his excitement clear even over the phone. "The timing couldn't be better. Can you come up to San Francisco next week? I want you to meet my team and present this to our senior partners." "Of course. What kind of timeline are you thinking?" "Fast. We're looking at closing 2 acquisitions before the end of the year, and this partnership model could apply to both of them. If we can get terms worked out quickly, we might be able to move on the first target by October." After hanging up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the Century City skyline. In 6 weeks, I'd gone from being publicly humiliated by my sister to potentially orchestrating the acquisition of her company. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was something more complicated than that. I wanted to prove to myself, and maybe to Madison, that success didn't look the way she thought it did. That weekend, I drove down to Riverside to have dinner with my parents. I hadn't seen them since the engagement party, and I wanted to tell them about Digital Bridge Solutions before they heard about it from someone else. We sat in their backyard as the sun set behind the orange trees, eating my mother's famous enchiladas and catching up on family news. I waited until after dessert to bring up my company. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something about my work." My father looked up from his coffee, probably expecting another conversation about my retail job or my vague computer projects. "I haven't been entirely honest about what I've been doing," I continued. "The truth is, I started a company 3 years ago. We help businesses with digital marketing and online presence. It's grown pretty significantly." My mother blinked. "A company, like your own business?" "Yes, with my partner Marcus. We have 12 employees now, and we're expanding pretty quickly." My father leaned forward. "What kind of revenue are we talking about?" "Last year, about $2 million. This year, we're on track for $4 million. The silence stretched for almost a minute. My parents looked at each other, then back at me, processing information that didn't match their understanding of their younger daughter's life. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" my mother asked finally. "Because I wanted to make sure it was real first, and because I knew it would change how people saw me, and I wasn't ready for that." "Does Madison know?" my father asked. I shook my head. "No, and I'd prefer to keep it that way for now." My mother frowned. "Honey, she's your sister. Don't you think she'd be proud of you?" I thought about Madison's words at the engagement party, her genuine belief that I was an embarrassment to the family, her conviction that I lacked ambition and was comfortable being mediocre. "Maybe," I said, "but I think she needs to figure some things out about herself first." The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could see my parents processing this new information, recalibrating their understanding of both their daughters. For the first time in years, I felt like they were seeing me as something other than the Peterson sister who couldn't get her act together. Driving back to Los Angeles that night, I thought about what it would mean if the Sterling partnership went through. Digital Bridge Solutions would become a major player in the marketing world almost overnight. We'd have resources to take on bigger clients, hire more staff, maybe even consider our own acquisitions, and Madison, who'd spent years looking down on my lack of corporate success, would find herself working for a company that only existed because her embarrassing little sister had built something worth partnering with. The irony wasn't lost on me, but as I drove through the darkness toward the city lights ahead, I realized this wasn't about proving Madison wrong anymore. It was about proving myself right, about the choices I'd made, the risks I'd taken, and the kind of success that couldn't be measured by job titles or corner offices. In 2 days, I'd be sitting across from Sterling Media Group's senior partners, proposing a partnership that could change everything. Madison had no idea that her dream of running Henderson and Associates might soon depend entirely on impressing the sister she'd dismissed as a family failure. But she was about to find out. The Sterling Media Group offices occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower in San Francisco's financial district. As I stepped out of the elevator on the 38th floor, carrying my presentation materials and a carefully rehearsed pitch, I had no idea that 2 blocks away, Madison was having the worst week of her professional life. The meeting went better than I'd dared to hope. Jake had assembled a team of 5 senior partners, including Sterling's West Coast expansion director Elena Vasquez. They listened intently as I presented our partnership proposal, asked detailed questions about our client retention rates and growth projections, and spent nearly an hour discussing how Digital Bridge Solutions could accelerate their acquisition strategy. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need," Elena said as the meeting wrapped up. "Traditional agencies are struggling to adapt, but they still have valuable client relationships and market presence. Your model gives us a way to preserve that value while modernizing their capabilities. What's your timeline for decision-making? I asked. We'll need to run this by our board, but I'm optimistic. Can you be ready to move quickly if we get approval? We're looking at several acquisition targets, and the market is competitive. I assured them that Digital Bridge Solutions was prepared to scale rapidly, and we spent another 20 minutes discussing operational details. As I gathered my materials to leave, Jake walked me to the elevator. Between you and me, he said quietly, there's one agency in particular we've been watching. Henderson & Associates. They're hemorrhaging clients, but they've got some solid assets. If we move on them, would you be prepared to take point on their digital transformation? My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. Absolutely. We've researched several Bay Area agencies as potential integration targets. Henderson would be an excellent test case for the partnership model. Good. I'll be in touch soon. The elevator doors closed, and I allowed myself a small smile as I descended toward street level. Everything was falling into place even faster than I'd anticipated. What I didn't know was that while I was securing Sterling's interest in acquiring Henderson & Associates, Madison was 3 miles away in Henderson's conference room, watching her world crumble in real time. It started with a phone call that Richard Henderson took in his office while Madison waited outside for their weekly strategy meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see his face change from neutral to concerned to genuinely alarmed. He was scribbling notes frantically, asking questions in the clipped tone he used when major problems were developing. When he finally emerged, his usually calm demeanor had cracked. Meridian Hotels is pulling their account, he announced without preamble. Madison felt the blood drain from her face. What? That's impossible. I just delivered the Q4 campaign concepts last week. They loved the new creative direction. They're citing strategic realignment of marketing priorities and need for enhanced digital capabilities, Richard continued, reading from his notes. Effective immediately, they're conducting a formal agency review. We have 30 days to repitch against 3 other agencies. Who are we competing against? Richard's expression darkened further. Zenith Creative, Morrison & Partners, and some boutique digital agency called Innovation Labs. Apparently, they specialize in integrated online customer acquisition and brand amplification. Madison had heard of the first 2 agencies. They were Henderson's size and reputation, traditional competitors in the Bay Area market, but Innovation Labs was unfamiliar, which somehow made them more threatening. We can win this, Madison said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Our work with Meridian has been award-winning. We understand their brand better than any newcomer could. Richard nodded, but his enthusiasm was forced. We'll need to completely overhaul our pitch, more digital focus, demonstrate ROI capabilities, show them we can compete in the modern marketplace. Over the next week, Madison threw herself into preparing for the Meridian repitch. She worked 16-hour days, assembled focus groups, commissioned new market research, and coordinated with every department in the agency. But the more she learned about what Meridian wanted, the more she realized how far behind Henderson & Associates had fallen. The hotel chain wasn't just looking for pretty advertisements anymore. They wanted comprehensive digital strategies, social media campaigns that could be measured and optimized in real time, influencer partnerships, targeted online advertising, customer journey mapping, and conversion rate optimization. They wanted data-driven results, not creative awards. Henderson's digital team consisted of 2 junior designers and 1 social media coordinator, who mostly posted stock photos with inspirational quotes. They didn't have the analytics software Meridian was asking about, the programmatic advertising capabilities, or the technical infrastructure to deliver what modern hospitality marketing required. Madison scheduled an emergency meeting with the digital team to explore their options. Can we build out these capabilities in the next 3 weeks? She asked. Jeremy Walsh, the senior digital designer, looked uncomfortable. Not really. We'd need new software, additional staff, and honestly, none of us have experience with the kind of advanced analytics they're requesting. This isn't about designing better graphics. They want a complete digital transformation. Then we'll partner with someone, Madison decided. There must be digital specialists we can bring in as consultants. For the pitch, maybe, Jeremy replied. But if we win the account, we'd need permanent capabilities. Meridian is talking about increasing their digital spend by 400%. We couldn't handle that workload with our current setup. That night, Madison stayed late in the office, researching digital marketing agencies and trying to understand exactly what Meridian wanted. The more she learned, the more she realized that Henderson and Associates wasn't just behind the curve. They were operating in a completely different industry than their competitors. Innovation Labs, the boutique agency she'd dismissed earlier, had a website that showcased case studies Madison could barely comprehend. They'd helped a restaurant chain increase online orders by 600% through targeted social media advertising. They'd used artificial intelligence to optimize hotel booking conversion rates. They'd created interactive digital campaigns that generated millions of social media impressions and measurable revenue increases. Henderson's recent work for Meridian looked elegant and sophisticated by comparison, but it also looked completely disconnected from how modern consumers actually discovered and booked hotels. The breaking point came during a strategy session with Richard and the senior staff. They were reviewing their competitive analysis when Tom Chen, the account director who actually managed the Meridian relationship, spoke up. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Meridian's marketing director called me yesterday, off the record." The room went silent. Madison felt her stomach clench. "She wanted to give me a heads up that they're not just looking for better digital capabilities," Tom continued. "They're actively trying to get away from traditional agency models entirely. They want partners who can prove ROI, optimize campaigns in real time, and integrate with their internal data systems. She said our creative work has been beautiful, but it hasn't moved the needle on their actual business metrics." Richard rubbed his temples. What are their actual business metrics? Online booking conversions, social media engagement rates, customer acquisition costs, lifetime value optimization. Things we've never measured because we've never had the tools to measure them. Madison felt the walls closing in. "We can learn, we can adapt." "In 3 weeks?" Tom asked gently. "Madison, I've been talking to the other agencies Meridian is considering. They're not just ahead of us on digital capabilities, they're ahead of us by years." Innovation Labs showed them a prototype campaign that uses machine learning to personalize hotel recommendations based on customer browsing behavior. How do we compete with that? The answer, of course, was that they couldn't. But Madison wasn't ready to admit defeat. "We compete by emphasizing our strengths," she said firmly. "Brand expertise, creative excellence, deep understanding of luxury hospitality. Digital capabilities can be learned, but brand intuition can't be taught." Jeremy Walsh exchanged a look with Tom Chen. Neither of them seemed convinced, but they didn't argue further. After the meeting, Madison called her friend Stephanie, who worked at a competing agency in Los Angeles, hoping to get insight into how other traditional agencies were handling digital transformation. "Honestly," Stephanie said, "most of us are struggling. The smart agencies are either acquiring digital specialists or partnering with them. The agencies that are trying to build digital capabilities from scratch are hemorrhaging clients." "What about acquisitions? Expensive and complicated. You're essentially buying a completely different type of company and trying to integrate 2 different cultures. Plus, the best digital agencies are either too expensive or they're growing so fast they don't want to be acquired. And partnerships? Hit or miss. The digital agencies that are worth partnering with usually want equity stakes or long-term exclusive deals. And even then, you're basically admitting to your clients that you can't provide essential services in-house." After hanging up, Madison sat in her office as the sun set over San Francisco Bay, trying to process the reality of Henderson and Associates' situation. They weren't just losing one client, they were becoming obsolete. The industry had evolved around them while they'd been focused on winning creative awards and maintaining their reputation for elegant brand work. The next morning brought worse news. Richard called an all-hands meeting to announce that 2 more clients had requested agency reviews. Both cited similar concerns about digital capabilities and measurable results. "We're looking at potentially losing 40% of our annual revenue," Richard told the assembled staff. "I won't sugarcoat this. If we can't turn things around quickly, we'll need to consider our options." After the meeting, Madison overheard Tom Chen on a phone call in his office. He was speaking quietly, but his door was open, and she could hear fragments of the conversation. "Great opportunity for someone with my experience. Yes, I'd be interested in exploring that. Full-service digital capabilities would be a major draw." He was interviewing. Tom Chen, the account director who managed their most important client relationships, was looking for another job. Madison felt panic rising in her chest. If Tom left, they'd almost certainly lose the clients who trusted him. If they lost those clients, Henderson and Associates would be fighting for survival. And if the agency went under, Madison's carefully constructed career would collapse with it. That evening, she called Trevor from her apartment. needing to talk through her growing anxiety with someone who understood corporate politics. Maybe it's time to start exploring your own options, Trevor suggested after she'd explained the situation. If Henderson is really in trouble, you don't want to go down with the ship. I can't just abandon them. Richard has been grooming me to take over the agency eventually. This is supposed to be my future. Madison, be realistic. If the agency is becoming obsolete, there might not be a future to take over. You could probably land a position at one of the bigger agencies in the city. Your portfolio is strong, and you've got name recognition in the industry. But that wasn't what Madison wanted to hear. She'd spent 3 years positioning herself as Richard's heir apparent, building her reputation as Henderson's creative leader. The thought of starting over as a mid-level employee at someone else's agency felt like admitting failure. I need to save this place, she said finally. I just need to figure out how. Over the weekend, Madison threw herself into research with the desperate energy of someone trying to solve an impossible puzzle. She read everything she could find about digital marketing, watched online tutorials about analytics and automation, and tried to understand the gap between what Henderson offered and what modern clients needed. The more she learned, the more overwhelming the challenge became. Digital marketing wasn't just about posting on social media or creating banner ads. It was a complex ecosystem of data analysis, algorithmic optimization, technical integration, and continuous testing. Henderson would need to rebuild their entire service offering from the ground up. Monday morning brought the news she'd been dreading. Tom Chen knocked on her office door at 9 a.m., looking uncomfortable but resolute. I wanted to tell you personally before I tell Richard, he said. I've accepted a position at Zenith Creative. Today's my last day. Madison felt the floor drop out from under her. Tom, please, we can work through this. If it's about compensation, or responsibilities, or... It's not about money, Madison. Zenith is offering me the chance to work with clients who are actually growing their businesses through modern marketing. I can't keep explaining to clients why we can't provide services that every other agency offers as standard. After Tom left her office, Madison sat staring at her computer screen for a long time. 3 years of building her reputation, positioning herself for partnership, working toward taking over the agency, and it was all crumbling because the world had changed while she wasn't paying attention. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw your latest campaign in Adweek. So proud of your success. When are you coming home for dinner? Madison looked at the message, then at the award plaques on her wall, then at the view of San Francisco Bay that had once made her feel so accomplished. Her mother still thought she was climbing toward the top of the marketing world. Her family still saw her as the Peterson sister who'd figured out how to succeed. None of them knew that success in marketing no longer looked like anything Madison had learned how to do. That afternoon, Richard Henderson called her into his office for a conversation that changed everything. I've been contacted by a corporate development firm, he said without preamble. They represent a larger agency group that's interested in acquisition discussions. Madison's heart sank. You're selling? I'm exploring options. Madison, I'm 63 years old. I was planning to retire in 2 years anyway. If I can find a buyer who'll preserve what we've built here while providing the resources to modernize, it might be the best outcome for everyone. What about your plans for me to take over? Richard's expression softened. That was always contingent on the agency remaining viable. If we can't adapt to the current market, there won't be anything left to take over. Who's the potential buyer? I don't have details yet. The development firm is being fairly secretive about their client. But they seem to understand our situation, and they're specifically interested in agencies that need digital transformation support. Madison felt something cold settling in her stomach. When would this happen? If we decide to move forward, probably within the next 60 days. They want to close before the end of the year. That night, Madison called her parents from her apartment, needing to hear familiar voices while her professional world disintegrated around her. How's work, sweetheart? Her mother asked. Still managing those big hotel campaigns? Madison found herself unable to explain what was really happening. How could she tell her family that the agency they thought she was destined to run was being sold because it had become irrelevant? How could she admit that her expertise in traditional marketing was worthless in the current industry? It's fine, Mom. Just busy with some new challenges. Well, you've always been so good at solving problems. Remember when you helped Rachel with her college applications? You've got such a gift for strategy. Rachel. Madison hadn't thought about her sister in weeks, Hadn't wondered what she was doing or whether she'd taken the advice about finding a real job. The family embarrassment was probably still folding clothes and pretending her computer hobbies would lead somewhere meaningful. At least one Peterson sister still knew her place in the world. The Sterling Media Group partnership agreement arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, delivered by courier to our Century City offices. 43 pages of legal language that essentially made Digital Bridge Solutions the preferred digital transformation partner for all of Sterling's West Coast acquisitions. Marcus and I sat in our conference room, reviewing the terms with David Restrepo over speakerphone. The financial projections were staggering. If Sterling completed their planned acquisitions over the next 18 months, our revenue would increase by 400%. This is unprecedented, David said from his office in Beverly Hills. They're essentially guaranteeing you first right of refusal on integration contracts worth potentially $15 million. What's the catch? I asked, because there was always a catch. Timeline. They want to move fast on their first acquisition target. You'd need to be ready to deploy a full integration team within 30 days of closing. I looked at Marcus, who was already pulling up our staffing projections on his laptop. We can do 30 days, he said. We'd need to hire aggressively, but we've got the infrastructure. There's something else, David continued. Sterling wants an exclusive presentation of your integration methodology before they finalize their first acquisition target. They're flying you up to San Francisco next week to present to their board of directors. After hanging up, Marcus and I spent the rest of the day planning our presentation strategy. This wasn't just about securing one contract. We were positioning Digital Bridge Solutions to become a major player in corporate acquisitions across the entire West Coast. Do we know which agency they're targeting first? Marcus asked as we reviewed our case studies. Jake mentioned Henderson & Associates as a possibility, but they're evaluating several options. We need to be ready for any scenario. What I didn't tell Marcus was that I'd spent the past 2 weeks conducting my own intelligence gathering on Henderson & Associates. Not corporate espionage, just careful research using publicly available information and industry contacts. The picture that emerged was even worse than I'd initially suspected. Henderson had lost 2 more clients since the Meridian review process began. Their creative director had resigned to join a startup. 3 junior employees had been laid off. According to Sarah Kim, who'd maintained friendships with current Henderson staff, morale was at an all-time low. Most importantly, I'd learned that Richard Henderson was actively shopping the agency. He'd met with 2 other potential buyers in addition to Sterling, but neither could offer the digital transformation capabilities that Sterling's partnership with us provided. The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison's agency was failing precisely because they lacked the digital expertise that I'd spent 3 years building. Her dismissal of my computer hobbies now represented the difference between Henderson's survival and bankruptcy. But I wasn't motivated by revenge. If anything, I felt sorry for Madison. She'd built her career around skills that were becoming obsolete, and she didn't even realize it yet. The coming transformation would be brutal for employees who couldn't adapt, regardless of their past performance or political positioning. The night before my Sterling presentation, I called Elena Vasquez to confirm the agenda and attendee list. We'll have the full board, plus our acquisition team and legal counsel, she explained. Richard Henderson will be joining us virtually to discuss his agency's situation, but you'll be presenting first. We want the board to understand our integration capabilities before they meet the acquisition target. Will Mr. Henderson be available for questions during my presentation? Reasons? But your presentation will directly influence how we structure the Henderson acquisition, assuming we move forward. After hanging up, I realized that Madison's professional fate was about to be decided in a room where she had no voice, no representation, and no idea what was happening. Her future depended entirely on Sterling's confidence in Digital Bridge Solutions' ability to modernize her agency. The presentation went flawlessly. Sterling's board was impressed by our growth trajectory, our client retention rates, and our detailed methodology for integrating traditional agencies into digital-first business models. We spent 2 hours discussing timelines, resource allocation, and success metrics. This is exactly what we need, said Caroline Mitchell, Sterling's CEO. Traditional agencies have valuable client relationships and brand expertise, but they're hemorrhaging revenue because they can't compete in the digital marketplace. Your integration model preserves their strengths while eliminating their weaknesses. What's your timeline for the Henderson acquisition? I asked. If the board approves today, and I expect they will, we'll make an offer next week. Richard Henderson is motivated to close quickly, so we could potentially finalize by month end. Elena Vasquez pulled me aside after the formal presentation. There's something you should know about Henderson and Associates. Their creative director, Madison Peterson, has been positioning herself to take over the agency when Richard retires. She's talented, but she has zero digital experience, and she's been resistant to modernization efforts. My heart skipped, but I kept my expression neutral. How do you think she'll respond to the integration process? That depends on whether she can adapt. Some traditional marketers embrace digital transformation once they understand the opportunities. Others see it as a threat to their expertise and resist the changes. And if she resists? Elena's expression was matter-of-fact. Then she won't be part of the long-term team. We can't let one person's ego derail a $15 million integration. I nodded professionally, but inside I felt a complex mix of emotions. Madison had dismissed my digital expertise as worthless hobbies. Now that same expertise would determine whether she kept her job. Sterling's board approved the Henderson acquisition that afternoon. I flew back to Los Angeles knowing that within weeks I'd be walking into Madison's agency as the person responsible for dragging them into the digital age. Over the next 10 days, I threw myself into preparation. I assembled an integration team of 8 specialists, developed a 90-day transformation timeline, and created detailed assessments for every department at Henderson and Associates. Marcus would lead the technical implementation while I focused on change management and strategic planning. We'd learned from previous smaller integrations that resistance to change was often the biggest obstacle to successful transformation. "How much do you want to tell them about your family connection?" Marcus asked during one of our planning sessions. It was a question I'd been avoiding. Sterling knew that Digital Bridge Solutions was based in Los Angeles, but they didn't know I had personal history with Henderson's creative director. The professional thing to do would be to disclose the relationship and potentially recuse myself from direct interaction with Madison. I'll tell Sterling before we start, I decided, but I won't let it affect the integration process. Madison will be evaluated on her ability to adapt, just like everyone else. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly news of Sterling's interest would leak within Henderson and Associates. Sarah Kim called me on a Friday evening, her voice tight with anxiety. "Rachel, I don't know if you've heard, but Henderson is about to be acquired by some big media company. Everyone's freaking out because nobody knows what it means for our jobs." "What are people saying?" "Richard held an all-hands meeting yesterday. He was vague about details, but he said the new owners would be bringing in digital transformation specialists to modernize our operations." Madison looked like she was going to be sick. I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. She'd spent years positioning herself to inherit Henderson and Associates, only to discover that the agency she'd planned to run was being sold to strangers who would gut everything she'd worked to build. How is Madison handling it? Not well. She's been working 18-hour days trying to save the Meridian account, but everyone knows it's a lost cause. And now she's terrified that the new owners will see her as dead weight because she doesn't have digital experience. Is she looking for other jobs? I think she's in denial. She keeps talking about how valuable her brand expertise is, how the new owners will need someone who understands luxury marketing. But honestly, Rachel, the industry has moved past what Henderson does. Even if they keep Madison, she'd need to learn completely new skills. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, thinking about the 17-year-old girl who'd tutored me in algebra when I was failing high school math, the sister who'd driven me to community college orientations when our parents were too busy with work, the woman who'd hugged me after my first heartbreak and told me I deserved better. Somewhere along the way, Madison had become someone who measured her worth by putting others down, but underneath the corporate ambition and professional jealousy, she was still my sister, and she was about to face the biggest challenge of her career, with no idea that her family embarrassment was the person who would decide her fate. Sterling finalized the Henderson acquisition on October 28th. The purchase price was $3.2 million, significantly less than Henderson's peak valuation 3 years earlier, reflecting their declining client base and outdated capabilities. Richard Henderson would stay on as a consultant for 6 months before retiring. Most of the existing staff would be retained during the integration period, with permanent positions dependent on their ability to adapt to new methodologies. I received the official notification from Elena Vasquez on Halloween morning. Integration begins November 15th. Your team will have full access to Henderson's offices, staff, and client files. We're counting on you to make this transition as smooth as possible. 2 weeks to finalize our team. relocate to San Francisco, and begin the process of transforming Madison's agency into a modern digital marketing company. 2 weeks before, I'd walk into her office and reveal that the family embarrassment she'd dismissed was now her professional superior. I spent those 2 weeks working with a therapist to separate my personal feelings from my professional responsibilities. Dr. Amanda Price specialized in workplace family dynamics, and she helped me understand the psychological complexity of the situation I was entering. Your sister will likely go through the stages of grief, Dr. Price explained during our final session. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and hopefully acceptance. The key is maintaining your professionalism regardless of which stage she's experiencing. What if she can't adapt? What if I have to recommend letting her go? Then you make that recommendation based on business criteria, not personal history. The best thing you can do for Madison is treat her exactly like you'd treat any other employee in her situation. The Friday before integration began, Marcus and I flew to San Francisco and checked into corporate housing near Henderson's offices. That evening, we walked past the building where I'd be working for the next 3 months. It was a converted warehouse in the Mission District, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Through the glass, I could see people working late, probably trying to finish projects before the new owners took control. One of those people was Madison, hunched over her computer in a corner office, surrounded by creative awards and campaign posters. She looked exhausted, stressed, completely absorbed in whatever she was working on. She had no idea that in 3 days, her little sister would walk through the front door and introduce herself as the person responsible for determining whether Madison Peterson had a future in marketing. I stood on the sidewalk for several minutes, watching my sister work frantically to save a career built on expertise that was no longer valuable. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about revenge or vindication. I was thinking about how much easier this would have been if she'd just asked me what I did for a living instead of assuming she already knew. Monday morning, everything would change. For both of us. November 15th dawned gray and drizzly in San Francisco, the kind of morning that made the city's glass towers disappear into low-hanging clouds. I stood in front of the mirror in my corporate housing bathroom at 6 a.m., adjusting the collar of my navy blazer and trying to calm the nervous energy that had kept me awake most of the night. Today, I would walk into Henderson & Associates as the lead digital transformation consultant for Sterling Media Group. Today, Madison would discover that her family embarrassment was now her professional superior. Marcus knocked on my door at 6:30, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a tablet loaded with our presentation materials. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, though my hands were shaking slightly as I gathered my briefcase. We arrived at Henderson's offices at 8 a.m. sharp, 30 minutes before the all-hands meeting that would introduce the Sterling integration team to the Henderson staff. The lobby was exactly what I'd expected from a traditional agency. Polished concrete floors, abstract art on the walls, a reception desk that looked more like a sculpture than functional furniture. Elena Vasquez met us at the elevator, looking crisp and professional in a charcoal suit. "The Henderson team is assembled in the main conference room. Richard Henderson will introduce you, then you'll have the floor to explain the integration process." "How are they feeling about the acquisition?" Marcus asked as we rode up to the 3rd floor. "Mixed reactions. The senior staff are nervous about job security. The junior employees are excited about potential growth opportunities. Madison Peterson specifically requested a private meeting with you after the presentation." My stomach clenched. Did she say why? "She wants to discuss her role in the transition. Apparently, she has some strong opinions about how the integration should be handled." The elevator opened onto Henderson's main floor, and I got my first look at the agency Madison had been so proud of. It was beautiful in an old-fashioned way. Exposed brick walls lined with framed campaign posters, open workspaces that emphasized creativity over efficiency, a kitchen area that looked more like a coffee shop than a corporate break room. But I could also see the signs of decline that weren't visible from the street. Empty desks where laid-off employees used to work, outdated computer equipment that looked at least 5 years old. A general atmosphere of anxiety that no amount of industrial chic design could mask. "Rachel?" I turned toward the voice and found myself face-to-face with Tom Chen, the account director who'd left Henderson just weeks earlier. He was carrying a box of personal items and looked genuinely surprised to see me. "Tom, what are you doing here?" "Picking up some files I forgot when I left." "What are you doing here?" His eyes moved from my professional attire to the Sterling Media Group credentials hanging around my neck. Wait, you're the digital transformation consultant? Before I could answer, Elena appeared beside us. Tom, you remember Rachel Kessler from Digital Bridge Solutions. She'll be leading Henderson's modernization efforts. Tom's expression shifted from surprise to something close to awe. Rachel, I had no idea. This is incredible. You're exactly what this place needs. You know each other? Elena asked. We met through industry contacts, I said quickly. Tom mentioned he'd worked at Henderson. Tom was clearly putting pieces together, but he didn't push for details. Well, good luck. This team is talented, but they're going to need a lot of help adapting to modern marketing practices. After Tom left, Elena led us toward the conference room where Henderson's staff was assembled. Through the glass walls, I could see about 20 people seated around a long table, most looking nervous or resigned. And there, at the far end of the table, was Madison. She was dressed in her usual armor, a perfectly tailored black dress, subtle jewelry, hair styled with the kind of precision that required professional maintenance. But even from across the room, I could see the stress in her posture, the way she held her shoulders too high, the slight tremor in her hands as she flipped through a legal pad covered in notes. Richard Henderson stood at the head of the table, looking older and more tired than I'd expected. 3 years of watching his agency decline had taken a visible toll. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Elena Vasquez from Sterling Media Group and Rachel Kessler and Marcus Chen from Digital Bridge Solutions. They'll be leading our transition into the modern marketing landscape. I stepped forward, my heart pounding as Madison's eyes met mine across the room. For a split second, her expression was simply polite attention. Then recognition dawned, and I watched her face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching horror. Good morning, I began, my voice steady despite the emotional chaos in my chest. I'm Rachel Kessler, founder and CEO of Digital Bridge Solutions. Over the next 90 days, my team will be working with you to transform Henderson & Associates into a fully integrated digital marketing agency. The room was silent except for the sound of rain against the windows. Most of the staff were focused on me, taking notes or asking clarifying questions, but Madison sat frozen, staring at me like I was a ghost that had materialized in her conference room. I continued with our standard integration presentation, explaining how Digital Bridge Solutions would assess current capabilities, identify skill gaps, implement new technologies, and retrain staff in modern marketing methodologies. Marcus covered the technical aspects while I focused on change management and timeline expectations. The goal isn't to replace what Henderson & Associates does well, I explained. It's to expand your capabilities so you can compete effectively in today's marketplace. Your brand expertise and client relationships are valuable assets. We're here to build on those strengths, not eliminate them. Several staff members asked thoughtful questions about software training, new hire priorities, and client communication during the transition. Madison remained silent throughout the entire presentation, her face a mask of professional composure that didn't quite hide her shock. When the formal meeting ended, Richard Henderson shook my hand warmly. I have to say, Rachel, your company's reputation preceded you. I'm optimistic about what this partnership can accomplish. Thank you, Richard. We're excited to work with your team. As the staff began filing out of the conference room, Madison approached slowly, her legal pad clutched against her chest like a shield. Rachel, she said quietly, could we speak privately? Elena looked between us, sensing undercurrents she couldn't identify. I'll give you two some time to discuss integration strategies. Rachel, we'll reconvene at 11 to review department assessments. After the room cleared, Madison and I stood facing each other across the polished conference table. The silence stretched for almost a minute before she spoke. You're the CEO of Digital Bridge Solutions. Yes. For how long? 3 years. Madison sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs, her professional composure finally cracking. 3 years. You've been running a company for 3 years, and you never said anything. Would you have listened if I had? She flinched at the directness of the question. I don't understand. At Jenny's engagement party, you said you were happy with your work. You never mentioned owning a company. I said I was serious about my future. You assumed that meant I was delusional about my retail job. Madison's hands were shaking now, and she set down her legal pad to hide it. So when you came to the party, you already knew about Henderson's problems? I knew the industry was changing. I didn't know Sterling was targeting Henderson specifically until later. Sterling. Madison's voice was hollow. You're working for Sterling Media Group. I'm partnering with Sterling. Digital Bridge Solutions is an independent company. We specialize in helping traditional agencies adapt to digital marketing. And now you're here to what? Fix us. I sat down across from her, choosing my words carefully. I'm here to help Henderson and Associates become competitive in the modern marketplace. Whether that includes you depends entirely on your willingness to learn new skills. Madison laughed, but there was no humor in it. New skills. The family embarrassment is going to teach me new skills. Madison, no, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the gray San Francisco morning. Do you know what I've been doing for the past month? Trying to save the Meridian account by proving that traditional brand expertise is more valuable than digital gimmicks. Fighting to preserve what Henderson does best while everyone around me panicked about analytics and automation. And now, she turned back to face me. Now I find out that my little sister, who I publicly humiliated for lacking ambition, is the person who decides whether I keep my job. The pain in her voice was real, and for a moment, I saw past the corporate executive to the older sister who'd helped me with homework and driven me to job interviews when I was 18. Madison, this doesn't have to be about our personal history. I'm here to do a job, and you're an employee who needs to adapt to new requirements. If you can learn digital marketing skills, you'll have a place on the integrated team. If I can learn. She sat back down, her shoulders slumping. Rachel, I've spent my entire career mastering traditional marketing, brand positioning, creative development, client relationship management, and now you're telling me that none of that matters anymore. It matters, but it's not enough by itself. Modern marketing requires data analysis, technical integration, and measurable results. The creative work you do is still important, but it needs to be part of a larger digital strategy. Madison was quiet for a long moment, processing information that fundamentally challenged her understanding of her own expertise. The Meridian account, she said finally. We lost it because we couldn't provide digital capabilities. Probably. From what I've researched, they were specifically looking for agencies with proven ROI in online customer acquisition, and you can provide that. Yes, Digital Bridge Solutions has helped dozens of businesses increase their online revenue by 300 to 500%. Madison stared at the table, her professional identity visibly crumbling. So everything I've been fighting for, everything I thought made Henderson valuable, was actually the reason we were failing. Not everything. Henderson has genuine strengths, brand expertise, creative talent, established client relationships, but in 2023, those strengths need to be supported by digital capabilities to be competitive. And if I can't learn those capabilities, I met her eyes directly, then you won't be part of the long-term team. The honesty hit her like a physical blow. Madison Peterson, who'd spent 3 years positioning herself to inherit Henderson and Associates, was now facing the possibility that she might not even qualify to work at the agency she'd planned to run. How long do I have? She asked quietly. The integration process is 90 days. During that time, every employee will receive training in new methodologies and technologies. Your ability to adapt will be evaluated continuously, and you'll be the one evaluating me. I'll be part of the evaluation team, yes. But Madison, this isn't personal. Sterling Media Group invested $3.2 million in Henderson and Associates. They're not going to let family dynamics interfere with their return on investment. Madison stood up slowly, gathering her legal pad and smoothing her dress with hands that had finally stopped shaking. I need to think about this, she said. Of course. Take whatever time you need. The formal training schedule will be distributed tomorrow. She walked toward the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. Rachel, I genuinely thought you were wasting your potential, that you were settling for mediocrity while I was building something meaningful. I waited for her to continue. I was wrong about your potential, but I still don't understand why you let me believe those things. Why didn't you ever tell me about your company? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself since Sterling first contacted Henderson and Associates. Because, I said finally, I needed to prove it to myself before I could prove it to anyone else, and because I knew that once you found out, everything between us would change. Madison nodded slowly. It already has changed, hasn't it? Yes, it has. After she left, I sat alone in Henderson's conference room for several minutes, watching the rain streak down the windows and trying to process what had just happened. For 3 years, I'd built Digital Bridge Solutions partly to prove that Madison was wrong about my potential. Now that I'd succeeded beyond even my own expectations, the victory felt hollow. The woman who'd called me a family embarrassment was now struggling to adapt to an industry that had evolved past her expertise. The sister who'd dismissed my digital skills as worthless hobbies now needed those same skills to save her career. There was no satisfaction in watching Madison realize how wrong she'd been about me. If anything, I felt sorry for her. She'd built her professional identity around being the successful Peterson sister, and that identity was now crumbling in real time. Marcus knocked on the conference room door, interrupting my thoughts. "How did it go?" he asked. "Complicated," I replied. "She's going to need a lot of help adapting to digital marketing. And if she can't adapt?" I looked out at the San Francisco skyline, thinking about the 18 months that had passed since Jenny's engagement party, the journey from family humiliation to corporate authority. Then she'll learn what it feels like to be called an embarrassment by someone she underestimated. But as I said the words, I realized I didn't want that outcome. Despite everything Madison had said and done, she was still my sister, and the best revenge wouldn't be watching her fail, it would be helping her succeed in a world she'd never understood. The question was whether Madison's pride would let her accept help from the family member she'd spent years looking down on. Over the next 2 weeks, I would find out. The transformation of Henderson & Associates began in earnest the following Monday. I'd spent the weekend reviewing personnel files, client portfolios, and financial reports, building a comprehensive picture of what needed to change and how quickly we could implement those changes. The agency employed 19 people across 4 departments: creative, account management, strategy, and administration. 8 of them had skills that would translate directly to digital marketing. 6 could be retrained with intensive coaching. 5, including Madison, would need to completely reimagine their approach to marketing or risk being left behind. I arrived at Henderson's offices at 7 a.m. to set up our new training center in what had previously been a storage room on the 2nd floor. Marcus and 2 other digital bridge consultants were already there, installing new computers, configuring software, and preparing materials for our first comprehensive skills assessment. "How do you want to handle Madison?" Marcus asked quietly as we tested the analytics dashboard that would become central to Henderson's new service offerings. It was a question I'd been avoiding. In any normal integration, I'd start with the employees most likely to succeed and build momentum from their early wins. But Madison's situation was complicated by both her seniority and our personal history. Same as everyone else, I decided. Skills assessment first, then personalized training based on her specific gaps and strengths. And if she resists the process, then she resists. But she won't be able to say she wasn't given every opportunity to adapt. At 9 a.m., Henderson's staff assembled for their first day of digital marketing boot camp. I divided them into 3 groups based on their current skill levels. Digital natives, mostly junior employees who already understood social media and basic analytics. Traditional experts, senior staff with strong marketing fundamentals but limited technical experience. And complete beginners, anyone who'd never worked with digital tools. Madison had requested to be placed in the traditional experts group, which made sense given her background. But during the initial assessment, it became clear that her digital knowledge was even more limited than I'd expected. "Can you walk me through how you currently measure campaign effectiveness?" I asked during her individual evaluation session. Madison pulled out a folder filled with printed reports. "We track brand awareness through focus groups and surveys. We measure reach through media placement analysis. For creative impact, we use recall testing and award recognition. What about online engagement? Conversion rates? Customer acquisition costs? Those aren't really relevant to brand-focused campaigns. Our work is about creating emotional connections and long-term brand equity, not immediate sales." I made notes on her assessment form, trying to maintain professional neutrality. Madison's approach to marketing wasn't wrong, but it was incomplete. Modern clients needed both brand building and measurable business results. "Madison, I'm going to recommend that you start with our foundational digital course before moving to the traditional experts group." Her face flushed. "You're putting me with the beginners? I'm putting you where you'll learn most effectively. This isn't about ego, it's about building skills systematically." "Rachel, I've been doing marketing for 8 years. I have a degree from Berkeley, I've won industry awards, and those accomplishments are impressive. But digital marketing requires specific technical skills that aren't taught in traditional marketing programs. Everyone needs to start somewhere." Madison looked at her assessment results, her jaw tight with frustration. "So I'm supposed to sit in a room with recent college graduates and learn about Instagram from my little sister? You're supposed to sit in a room with other professionals and learn skills that will save your career. The words hung between us, harsher than I'd intended, but absolutely true. Madison stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her internal struggle between pride and pragmatism. Fine, she said finally, but I want accelerated advancement. If I can demonstrate competency faster than the standard timeline, I want to move to advanced training immediately. Agreed. This is competency-based, not time-based. As soon as you master foundational skills, we'll move you forward. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Madison throw herself into digital marketing education with the same intensity she'd once applied to saving the Meridian account. She was the first person in the training room each morning and the last to leave each evening. She took detailed notes, asked technical questions, and practiced new skills until she could execute them flawlessly. But more importantly, I watched her worldview shift as she began to understand what modern marketing could accomplish. During a session on social media advertising, Madison discovered that she could target potential hotel guests based on their search history, travel patterns, and income levels. Instead of creating one beautiful advertisement for a general audience, she could create dozens of personalized ads that spoke directly to specific customer segments. "This is incredible," she said, staring at the targeting options on Facebook's advertising platform. "I can reach people who searched for luxury hotels in Napa Valley within the last 30 days, who earn over $150,000 annually, and who follow specific travel influencers. And you can measure exactly how many of those people click through to book rooms," added Jamie Rodriguez, one of the junior employees who was helping with basic training. "Plus track their customer lifetime value to optimize your acquisition spend." Madison's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement I remembered from our childhood when she'd discovered a new book series or figured out a complicated math problem. So instead of guessing whether our campaigns work, we can actually prove their impact on hotel bookings. Exactly, and you can optimize in real time. If one ad creative is outperforming others, you can shift budget toward it immediately instead of waiting for quarterly reports. By the end of her second week in training, Madison had completed the foundational curriculum and was ready to move to intermediate skills. More importantly, she was beginning to see how digital capabilities could enhance rather than replace her creative expertise. "I've been thinking about the Meridian account," she said during one of our weekly progress reviews. "If we'd been able to combine our brand storytelling with targeted digital campaigns, we might have kept them. What would that have looked like?" Madison pulled out her notebook, which was now filled with campaign concepts that blended traditional brand work with digital strategy. Beautiful creative that tells the luxury story, but delivered through personalized retargeting to people who visited competitor websites, influencer partnerships tracked through affiliate links to measure actual bookings, print ads in luxury magazines supported by lookalike audience targeting on social media. It was exactly the kind of integrated thinking that modern agencies needed to succeed. Madison was finally understanding that digital marketing wasn't the enemy of creative excellence. It was a way to make creative work more effective and measurable. "That's a sophisticated approach," I said. "You're thinking like a modern marketer." Madison looked pleased but also slightly sad. "I keep wondering what would have happened if I'd learned this stuff 3 years ago. Would Henderson still be independent? Would we still have Meridian? Maybe. But you can't change the past. You can only apply what you're learning now." "Is it enough, though? For Sterling, I mean. Will they keep me if I can demonstrate digital competency?" It was the question she'd been afraid to ask directly, and the one I'd been dreading having to answer. Madison's progress was impressive, but she was still months behind her colleagues in practical experience. Sterling's decision would ultimately depend on how quickly she could translate her new knowledge into measurable results. "That depends on what you do with the skills you're learning," I said carefully. "Competency is just the first step. Sterling needs to see that you can apply digital capabilities to drive actual business outcomes, like winning back clients, potentially, or acquiring new ones, or improving performance for existing accounts." Madison was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Then she surprised me. "I want to pitch Meridian again. Madison, not for Henderson, for the integrated agency that we're becoming. I want to show them how we can combine brand expertise with digital capabilities to deliver results they've never seen before." I studied her face, looking for signs of the old Madison who'd been more interested in winning than learning. But what I saw was different. Determination tempered by genuine understanding of what modern marketing required. That's ambitious. Meridian already chose another agency. Their new agency is Innovation Labs, right? The boutique digital shop? I nodded. Through industry contacts, I'd learned that Meridian had selected innovation labs specifically for their technical capabilities and proven ROI in hospitality marketing. I've been researching their approach, Madison continued. They're strong on technical execution, but their creative work is generic. Stock photography, template designs, no real brand storytelling. They can drive bookings, but they're not building brand equity. And you think we can do both? I think we can do both better than anyone else in the market. Your digital expertise plus Henderson's creative legacy plus Sterling's resources, Innovation Labs can't compete with that combination. It was exactly the kind of thinking that Sterling wanted to see from Henderson's leadership team: strategic, competitive, focused on measurable outcomes. But it was also risky. If Madison failed to win back Meridian, it would confirm Sterling's doubts about keeping traditional staff who couldn't adapt quickly enough. "What's your timeline?" I asked. 2 weeks to develop the pitch. I want to present it to Meridian's marketing team before the end of the year. And if they say no?" Madison met my eyes directly. "Then at least I'll know I tried to save what's worth saving from the agency I love." That evening, I called Elena Vasquez to discuss Madison's proposal. Sterling's position was pragmatic. They'd support any initiative that demonstrated Henderson's new capabilities, but they wouldn't invest additional resources in what they considered a long-shot pitch. "If Madison Peterson can win back a major client using integrated digital strategies, that would be a strong signal about the success of your transformation process," Elena said. "But if she fails, it might confirm that some traditional staff can't adapt quickly enough to modern requirements. So it's a high-stakes test." "Everything is a high-stakes test right now, Rachel. Sterling invested significantly in Henderson & Associates. We need to see results, not just progress." Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Madison work harder than I'd ever seen her work before. She collaborated with Marcus on programmatic advertising strategies, studied conversion optimization case studies, and learned to use analytics platforms that would have been incomprehensible to her a month earlier. But she also brought something unique to the process: a deep understanding of luxury hospitality branding that none of us had. She knew how to make wealthy travelers feel special, how to create desire for experiences rather than just products, how to position hotels as lifestyle choices rather than commodity purchases. The pitch she developed was genuinely innovative. Instead of choosing between brand building and performance marketing, Madison proposed a campaign that would accomplish both simultaneously: stunning creative work that told Meridian's luxury story, but delivered through hyper-targeted digital channels to specific customer segments, influencer partnerships that felt authentic but included sophisticated tracking to measure actual bookings, print advertising that maintained brand prestige while driving traffic to optimize landing pages. Most importantly, every element of the campaign would be measured against specific business metrics: customer acquisition cost, lifetime value, booking conversion rates, and return on advertising spend. "This is what modern luxury marketing looks like," Madison explained during her practice presentation. "Beautiful, aspirational, effective, and accountable." The real test would come in 3 days, when Madison would present to Meridian's marketing team via video conference. It would be her first opportunity to demonstrate what she'd learned, and quite possibly her last chance to prove that traditional marketers could adapt to the digital age. More importantly, it would determine whether the Peterson sister, who'd once called me a family embarrassment, could save her career by embracing the expertise she'd once dismissed as worthless hobbies. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Madison's professional future now depended entirely on digital marketing skills she'd learned from the sister she'd publicly humiliated for lacking ambition. As I watched her prepare for the biggest presentation of her career, I realized that revenge had never been my goal. What I'd wanted all along was for Madison to see me as someone worth respecting. And now, finally, she did. The question was whether that respect had come too late to save the relationship between us, or too late to save her job. December 18th arrived with the kind of crisp, clear weather that made San Francisco feel like a postcard. I stood in Henderson & Associates' main conference room at 8:45 a.m., watching Madison make final adjustments to her presentation setup, while Elena Vasquez and 2 Sterling executives took their seats at the table. In 15 minutes, Madison would deliver the most important pitch of her career to Meridian Hotel's marketing team. Everything she'd learned over the past 6 weeks would be put to the test in front of the client she'd lost and the executives who would decide her future. "Audio check looks good," Marcus said from his position behind the video conference equipment. "Meridian's team should be joining in about 5 minutes. Madison nodded, smoothing her navy blazer for the third time in as many minutes. She'd abandoned her usual designer armor in favor of something more approachable, professional but not intimidating, confident but not arrogant. Even her body language had changed. Gone was the rigid posture of someone defending their expertise. In its place was the relaxed alertness of someone who knew they had something valuable to offer. "Remember," I said quietly, "this isn't about proving that traditional marketing was right all along. It's about demonstrating how traditional excellence can be amplified by digital capabilities." "I know," Madison replied. "Show them what's possible when creativity meets data." The video screen flickered to life, revealing 4 people sitting around a conference table in Meridian's Los Angeles headquarters. I recognized Jennifer Walsh, Meridian's VP of Marketing, from industry events. She looked skeptical but curious as she introduced her team. "Henderson and Associates," Jennifer began, "or should I say Sterling Media Group. We were surprised to receive your request for a presentation, given that we're already working with Innovation Labs." Elena Vasquez leaned forward smoothly. "We understand that, Jennifer, but our recent acquisition of Henderson has created some unique capabilities that we think could benefit Meridian's marketing objectives. Madison Peterson will be presenting an integrated approach that combines the brand expertise you've worked with for years with cutting-edge digital performance marketing." Madison took a breath and began. "Jennifer, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I want to start by acknowledging that Henderson and Associates failed to meet your evolving needs 6 months ago. We were asking you to choose between brand building and performance marketing when you needed both. It was exactly the right opening. Honest about past failures while positioning the current opportunity." I saw Jennifer's expression soften slightly. "What we're proposing today," Madison continued, "is a campaign that delivers the luxury brand experience Meridian is known for while driving measurable booking increases through targeted digital channels." For the next 20 minutes, Madison walked through a comprehensive strategy that seamlessly blended creative excellence with technical sophistication. She showed how Meridian's brand story could be told through personalized video content delivered to specific customer segments. She demonstrated how influencer partnerships could feel authentic while tracking actual booking conversions. She explained how print advertising in luxury magazines could drive traffic to optimized landing pages that captured customer data and enabled remarketing. Most importantly, she presented specific performance metrics and projected ROI based on comparable campaigns. Digital Bridge Solutions had executed for other hospitality clients. "Our preliminary analysis suggests this integrated approach could increase your direct booking conversions by 45% while reducing customer acquisition costs by 30%, Madison concluded. "You'd maintain the brand prestige that differentiates Meridian from competitors while achieving the performance metrics your corporate office requires." Jennifer Walsh was taking detailed notes. Her team members were asking technical questions that Madison answered with growing confidence. This wasn't the woman who'd dismissed digital marketing as worthless gimmicks. This was someone who genuinely understood how modern marketing could enhance everything she'd always been good at. "The creative work you're showing is beautiful," Jennifer said. "But can you actually deliver these performance metrics? Innovation Labs has strong case studies in hospitality marketing." Madison glanced at me briefly, then back at the screen. "Jennifer, the integrated team at Sterling includes Digital Bridge Solutions, who've delivered these exact results for resort properties in Nevada and luxury hotels in Arizona. The difference is that we can combine their proven digital expertise with Henderson's deep understanding of luxury hospitality branding. And you'd be the account director on this campaign. I'd be the creative director, working directly with Digital Bridge's performance marketing specialists. You'd have the brand expertise you've valued from Henderson, plus the technical capabilities you need to compete in today's marketplace." One of Meridian's team members spoke up. "What about Innovation Labs? We've already committed to a 6-month contract with them." Elena Vasquez answered smoothly. "We're not asking you to break existing commitments. We're proposing a pilot campaign for one property, maybe your new Sonoma location, to demonstrate what integrated luxury marketing can accomplish. If the results speak for themselves, we can discuss expanding the relationship." It was a smart approach, low risk for Meridian, high reward if the campaign succeeded. I could see Jennifer considering the proposal, weighing the potential benefits against the complexity of managing 2 agency relationships. "Can you have a detailed proposal and timeline for us by January 15th? She asked. "Absolutely," Madison replied without hesitation. "Then we'll review your proposal against Innovation Labs' Q1 campaign performance and make a decision by the end of January. After the call ended, the conference room fell silent for a moment. Madison had delivered a flawless presentation, but Meridian's response had been professionally non-committal. We wouldn't know the outcome for at least 6 weeks. Elena Vasquez was the first to speak. Madison, that was exactly what we hoped to see from Henderson's leadership team. Regardless of Meridian's decision, you've demonstrated that traditional marketers can successfully integrate digital capabilities. Thank you, Madison said, but I could see the anxiety in her eyes. She'd put everything into this presentation, and now she had to wait to learn whether it was enough. After Elena and the Sterling executives left, Madison and I found ourselves alone in the conference room where our professional relationship had begun 6 weeks earlier. Do you think they'll choose us? She asked. I think you gave them a compelling reason to choose us, I replied. But ultimately, it depends on whether Innovation Labs delivers the results they promised. Madison nodded, then sat down heavily in one of the conference chairs. Rachel, can I ask you something? Of course. 6 weeks ago, when you walked into this room as my boss, were you hoping I'd fail? It was a question I'd been asking myself throughout the integration process. Had I wanted to see Madison struggle? Had I enjoyed watching her realize how wrong she'd been about my potential? Honestly, I don't know, I said. Part of me wanted you to understand what it felt like to have your abilities questioned by someone you respected, but mostly, I just wanted you to see me differently. And now? I looked at my sister, really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the arrogant executive who'd called me a family embarrassment. She was someone who'd faced the possibility of professional failure and chosen to learn rather than deny. Someone who'd swallowed her pride and accepted help from the person she'd once dismissed. Now I'm proud of how hard you've worked to adapt, I said, and I hope Meridian gives us the chance to show them what we can accomplish together. Madison smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since the engagement party. Together. I like the sound of that. 3 weeks later, Jennifer Walsh called with Meridian's decision. Innovation Labs had delivered technically proficient campaigns with strong conversion metrics, but their creative work felt generic, and their brand understanding was superficial. Meridian wanted to move forward with our integrated approach for their Sonoma property, with the potential to expand the relationship if results exceeded expectations. Madison's first integrated campaign launched in February and exceeded projections by 60%. Direct bookings increased, customer acquisition costs dropped, and guest satisfaction scores improved as more qualified leads converted to actual stays. More importantly, Meridian's brand metrics remained strong throughout the campaign, proving that performance marketing and brand building could work in harmony. By April, Meridian had moved their entire account to Sterling Media Group. Madison was promoted to creative director for luxury hospitality, leading a team of 8 people across traditional and digital marketing disciplines. Henderson & Associates had not only survived its digital transformation, but had become one of Sterling's most successful integrated agencies. The professional success was satisfying, but the personal reconciliation meant more to me than any business outcome. Madison and I began having dinner together once a week, initially to discuss campaign strategies but eventually to rebuild the relationship that had been damaged by years of misunderstanding. She told me about the pressure she'd felt to be the successful Peterson sister, the way she'd used my struggles to make herself feel more accomplished. I told her about the loneliness of building digital bridge solutions without being able to share my excitement with family, about the hurt I'd carried from her public dismissal at Jenny's engagement party. We talked about our parents, who were still processing the revelation that both their daughters were successful professionals in the same industry. We laughed about the irony that Madison's marketing expertise and my digital skills turned out to be perfectly complementary rather than competitive. Most importantly, we began to understand each other as adults rather than the roles we'd played as children. 6 months after the Meridian presentation, Madison called me from her new office in Sterling's San Francisco headquarters. Rachel, I have something to tell you, she said, her voice carrying excitement I hadn't heard in years. What's going on? Meridian just referred us to Kimpton Hotels. They want us to pitch their complete digital transformation across 47 properties. If we win this, it'll be the largest integrated campaign Sterling has ever managed. I felt genuine pride hearing the excitement in my sister's voice. Madison, that's incredible, you've built something amazing. We've built something amazing, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without learning from you. After hanging up, I sat in my Los Angeles office thinking about the journey that had brought us to this point. 18 months earlier, Madison had publicly called me a family embarrassment who lacked ambition. Now she was leading major campaigns and crediting our collaboration for her success. But the most meaningful change wasn't professional. Madison had learned to value different kinds of success, and I'd learned that proving someone wrong wasn't as satisfying as helping them grow. At Jenny's wedding in June, Madison introduced me to relatives as my sister Rachel, who runs the digital marketing company that transformed my agency. There was genuine pride in her voice, and for the first time in years I felt like we were actually sisters rather than competitors. During the reception, Madison pulled me aside while our parents danced to music that reminded them of their own wedding 30 years earlier. "I owe you an apology," she said, "not just for the engagement party but for years of treating you like you were less capable than me." Madison, no, let me finish. I spent so much time trying to be the Peterson sister who had everything figured out that I never bothered to actually figure out who you were. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was actually there. I thought about the young woman who'd worked retail while building a company, who'd been dismissed as an embarrassment while creating something that would eventually save her sister's career. "We both made assumptions," I said. "The difference is that you were willing to learn when those assumptions were challenged. And you were generous enough to teach me, even after how I'd treated you." We stood together watching our family celebrate, thinking about all the years we'd spent misunderstanding each other and all the years we had ahead to build something better. "You know what's funny?" Madison said. "All those times I called you the family embarrassment, I was actually describing myself. I was so embarrassed by my own insecurities that I projected them onto you. And now—" She smiled, the same smile I remembered from childhood when she'd figured out a particularly difficult puzzle. "Now I know that success isn't about being better than other people. It's about being better than who you were yesterday." It had taken a corporate acquisition, professional humiliation, and 6 weeks of intensive learning for Madison to understand what I'd been trying to tell her for years. But understanding had finally come, and with it the possibility of being sisters in the truest sense. As we walked back toward our parents' table, Madison said something that made all the struggle worthwhile. "Rachel, thank you for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on you. Thank you for proving that people can change when they're brave enough to admit they need to." The family embarrassment had become the family success story, but more importantly, the Peterson sisters had finally learned to see each other clearly, without the distortion of old assumptions and childhood roles. And that transformation was worth more than any career achievement either of us would ever accomplish. Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who underestimated you? Have you watched someone grow when they finally realized they needed to change? Sometimes the best victory isn't beating someone who doubted you. It's helping them become the person they always had the potential to be. Because in the end, the most meaningful success is measured not by who you defeat, but by who you lift up along the way. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.